welcome everyone. 45 minutes is not a lot of time for such a complex topic, so let's jump straight into it and have a look on how CDP can help financial institutions to really use the data to ensure better ROI, to get their invested money back. And not only the money, but also the customer experience and customer loyalty. In short, happy customers. Nowadays, I think it's quite difficult to imagine that there once was a time when financial institutions and other companies didn't have enough data. Nowadays, it's just the other way around. We have so much data that the challenge is actually to find out what data pieces or what pieces of information about the clients can be used for activation and what pieces of data have the real value during the process of customer communication, customer activation, and so on. The data in major companies is usually fragmented and it's spread across many departments, many business processes, and so on. So the real challenge for any company is to create some kind of unified profile of their audience, of their clients. And CDP might be a great tool to put all that data together and get unified view on the customer profiles and to use the data for activations and for actually working with the customers, communicating with the customers, and at the end of the day, getting their money. So customer expectation nowadays is very high in terms of personalized communication. And it's very important to realize that the customers or clients of financial institutions do not only compare the company's communication and personalization among the companies in the same vertical. They are not comparing financial institution to financial institution only. They are comparing your brand, your company, with a lot of different companies from different verticals. And very simple idea might be, okay, all the companies have the same amount of data or very similar data. So how come that a small e-commerce company is much better in personalized communication than, for example, my bank or my insurance company? And you don't really want to get to that point. So what to do about it? Use the data that you have in the company to provide better customer experience and to get better return on investment on platforms such as CDP. There are several crucial points on how to achieve better return on investment using the data and using the tools offered in CDP platforms. We will focus on marketing spend. We will focus also on selling opportunities in terms of cross-sell and upsells. And we will also focus on retention strategies to keep existing clients as paying clients in your services. So basically, we will go through the entire life cycle of the clients and even before they become your clients, and focus on specific topics and points where CDP and unification of the data might help to achieve your business goals better. How does Mairo CDP help the clients or the brands to achieve better return on investment? I would say that the key value of Mairo CDP is in its wall-to-wall functionality. So Mairo CDP is a data platform first. It really is very strong in working with data from the collection point through transformations using ETL toolset and so on. We get very large data sets that we then unify through identity processes into detailed customer profiles. And those profiles can be of various types. which is very important because obviously one data model doesn't fit all. Sometimes even two data models doesn't fit all. And very often with the financial institutions, we have several data models that actually describe the customer entity. One of the data models can be for physical person. Another one would be for a company, another one for account and contract and so on. So it really depends on how we want to model the entity that will be used in our database. Miro is fully flexible in this and offers a possibility to use different types of user profiles within one platform. Once we create the user profile, of course, we need to aggregate them together into actionable audiences. And for this, we have very efficient and very uh, focused audience builder or segment builder that will help us to target specific audiences, specific client segments precisely across the channels. And when we talk about the channels, Mayra offers full spectrum of orchestrated journeys and activations on omni-channel level. So we have native channels, we have integration to existing communication channels within your company, or we can integrate basically any kind of service that will activate the clients. All this needs to be evaluated within a feedback loop within the analytical channel or within the analytical tool set of CDP platform. So Mayra offers full analytical tool set within the platform, as well as the possibility of exporting the analytical data into, for example, business intelligence tools or any other data analytical tools for further analysis. Now, democracy. Democracy seems to be the best governance or the best way of governance, not only in the real world, but also in the data world. What do we mean by democracy in the data? Data democratization is actually an initiative that I believe should be part of any large company that is highly dependable on data. That means any financial institution, I would say. So what we have mentioned before, the data is available, but it's not spread evenly through the organization. And very often we see different silos within organizations, such as sales departments, marketing department, customer client services, and so on. And each of those departments has pieces of data, and that data might even be centralized into some central data warehouse. But very often the data is not available across the entire organization, and that heavily impacts the business processes. Very often we hear the complaints of saying, oh, we are just client services. We have no idea what happens at marketing. We have no idea what happens at sales. We don't get enough information from those other departments. And CDP can again play very crucial role in breaking those silos and providing the actionable information across the departments. So why is this critical? The information enables real-time activations and provides a relevant basis for personalized communication. I would say that there is no worse scenario than something that really happens quite often in real life. When you, as a customer, receive a call from client services saying, we have personalized offer just for you. Now, please tell us how much you spent, what products you have, and blah, blah, blah. See, on the very first moment, you realize that the offer cannot be personalized when they are asking for the information they already have, but they have it in different department. So the real personalized scenario should be, hello, we have a very personalized offer for you. Currently, you are at this level of service. You are spending that kind of money. We can provide customized service for you. That's a lot different offer than asking for additional information. So, how does the siloed data look like? We can see different touch points within the customer journey, and we can see different data collection points. All those data collection points at the end of the day create an enriched profile of the client. Some of the data might be collected in real time. Some of the data needs to be collected in batch mode. For example, once a day, maybe once an hour, even once a month, depending on the data source. Mayor CDP is here to collect all the data from relevant data sources, put it together, create an enriched profile of the client, and provide the data from the enriched profile back to anyone who actually needs and should have access to the data. So how does the data democratization drive the revenue? We have several areas that we identified within the financial services of how the cross-organizational availability of the data can positively impact the revenue growth as well as customer experience and loyalty of the clients. So, for example, the data in CDP can help not only within the customer communication and activation, but it can also be used to improve processes within, for example, reduced fraud or risk scoring or even lead scoring within the sales teams and so on. That doesn't necessarily mean that those processes need to happen directly in CDP. Of course, CDP can be the data point that is providing the enriched data into risk scoring engines or fraud detection tools. The great advantage of CDP would be in centralization of the data and a real-time availability of detailed profiles of the clients. On the other hand, CDPs can flag anomalies in behavior of the clients sometimes on their own. So it really depends when or where you want to run those processes. Some of them can be run directly in CDP, some of those, and to be honest, I think it would be the majority of the processes related to risk scoring and fraud detection will use the data from CDP and will be in third-party applications or systems. Improved customer retention with proactive engagement. Customer retention is obviously a huge topic for any service-driven organization. We want to keep the customer with the organization for as long as possible, and we want to keep them active. It makes sense when we look at the life cycle of a usual client within financial institutions, then very often when they only have one product or they are within the service for a very short time, we may not be actually making a lot of money or even any money at all on those types of clients. And only if they stay in the service long enough or buy additional services through upsell and cross-sell, that client starts to be in the, let's say, profitable category. So detecting a possible churn or proactively acting on upsell and cross-sell can be a huge benefit that we are getting from CDP. Of course, there are processes or mechanisms that can be implemented directly in CDP, and there can be churn detection mechanisms directly in CDP. Or again, we can distribute the data to external services that will assess the risk of the churn and return the data back, and CDP will then provide the communication strategy directly to the client. Real-time personalization is a huge topic again, and the more data collection points we have and the more departments with their own unique communication strategies we have in the organization, the synchronization of real-time communication and personalization is actually very important. So this, on one hand, has huge potential of catching the client at the moment of their decision, at the right moment, at the right time, through the right channel. At the same time, it's huge opportunity to prevent clashes within the communication strategies across different departments. So we can imagine that there might be a situation caused by not properly synchronized data among the departments that might look like sending delayed payment on mortgage from one department and sending promotion for being such a nice client for the same product for the mortgage from different department. And this kind of doesn't work. So we should check the data through all the departments first before we send out the communication. And this can happen in real time with the CDP data. Okay. Why is the data democratization sometimes, and I wouldn't say all the time, quite difficult in financial institutions? Well, it's mainly because of those three factors that we have here. A lot of data is spread across legacy infrastructure. We know that some of the financial institutions are still heavily reliant, for example, on mainframes, on legacy databases, on legacy data formats, and so on. And it's close to impossible to change that data structure. And it's not really needed, to be honest, if we are able to build a, let's say, service structure above that legacy data layer. And that service can be CDP, especially when it has very strong data ingestion and data transformation capabilities, such as Mayro. Mayro CDP can ingest the data from almost any kind of system through any kind of data interface, and it can transform the data from legacy formats into something more usable for real-time processing, profile stitching and segmentation, and so on. Regulations, GDPR, CCPA, and so on. So industry-specific regulations, which are obviously very much needed in financial institution, but sometimes it's very difficult to navigate them, especially across different departments within the financial institution. Again, CDP as a centralized data repository can help to stay in compliance with those regulations. So we can collect data from different systems, and we can also distribute the data based on consents and regulation policies to the destination systems. So usually CDP will not provide the full capability of, let's say, interfaces for collection of preferences and consents and so on, but we take the data from those systems and store it at one place. And together with the stitching and identity management processes, we make sure that the client is properly identified and that all the consent information for this client is stored at one place. So we can say that the consent collection and consent centralization only works in conjunction with proper profile stitching and identity management. Simply, if the system sees one person as two different profiles and is unable to join them together, then even the consent information cannot be joined together, and you cannot prevent the mistakes in compliance like that. So CDP should really connect it together, create one unified profile, and use the data. The key, or let's say the key processes that we see here in how to use CDP to support the data democratization within the financial institutions is to make sure that all the works have an access to the data they need for their work. So when we look at the processes within the financial institutions from a customer journey point of view, then each department can identify where they are active on the customer journey within the different processes and what kind of data can support their work at a particular stage of the customer journey or within a particular phase of the customer life cycle. And if they identify during the business analysis that currently they are missing some data, we need to look elsewhere in the organization whether that piece of data is actually available, whether it's collected at all. And very often it is. We just need to make sure that it's now part of the client profile and that it's available to anyone in the organization that is eligible to the access to the data and needs the data and can use the data for activation. When I say eligible, then we need to make sure that only the people that are in compliance with the security policies and data security are accessing the information from the profiles and can actually use it, for example, for activation and so on. So again, we need to make sure that all the data is available, but at the same time, it needs to be only available to the right people at the right time for the right purpose. How Miro CDP is ensuring that we have all the relevant data at the right place in the right time. Basically, we split the data sources into two categories, and one of those would be real-time streaming data sources, websites, mobile application, or any other system that is providing the data in real time. Most often, that kind of data is focusing on clients' behavioral. The other type of the data would be usually from databases, legacy systems, and so on. And that data very often, not always, is processed in batches, and the update frequencies, let's say, would be much slower than real time. Sometimes it's minutes, hours, days, months. It depends on the data source and also the ability and the need to synchronize the data. Miro then takes all the data within the profile-related processes, provides the capability of joining the data together, creating a reliable and actionable profile of the client or several types of clients, several types of data models. When we have the profile, we apply the business rules. So basically saying, now you have all the data, what do you want to do with that data? And that needs to be driven by rules. And those rules, business processes, can be either, let's say, hardwired into the platform or configured, obviously, but as some kind of hardwired decision tree. Or we can, of course, implement some kind of machine learning or AI models to recognize the patterns in the profiles and suggest what can be done with this type of profile when they behave like that, when they have this kind of historical data, and so on. When we finally create or process the profiles within the rules, we can use them in activations, and the activation is a lot more efficient when we join the profiles together into actionable audiences. Then the audiences can be used in omnichannel communication, either through direct communication channels or through advertising, social networks, and so on. Data on its own does not make any money, believe it or not. I think you will believe it. When the data only sits in the data warehouse, it doesn't make any money. Not a surprise, right? It only burns energy, so it's actually using your money. So data activation is what translates to ROI, and not only in BFSI, it's in any type of the company. There are some, let's say, customer lifecycle related matrices or basic processes that we usually focus on. So it's customer lifetime value. When we get the customer, as I mentioned before, at the beginning, we might actually be losing money on every single customer for a certain type of a service. We are spending more money to acquire new customer than we are getting on their first payment or even first year of the payments. And we need to make sure that throughout the lifetime, we maximize the value or at least achieve the business goals through the lifetime of the client. To be able to actually achieve those reasonable balance between getting the maximum value and keeping the customer happy, we need to make sure that we actually know what is the possible lifetime value of particular type of a client within a specific segment with a specific behavior. So within CDP, we can employ predictive algorithms to evaluate a possible lifetime value of the client and re-evaluate even in real time if needed based on their behavior. Customer acquisition cost. That's another very important metric, obviously, for all people that work in marketing or even in customer services and sales team. Customer acquisition cost and the way how to actually reduce it. That can be done by better targeting of the communication and using the most efficient or the most cost-efficient communication channels and reducing, let's say, the advertisement waste for the clients or for the leads that would never convert or their conversion rate would be very low anyway. So that would be one of the ways how to reduce customer acquisition cost. Conversion rates, based on behavioral data and patterns, we can optimize suggestion for upsells and cross-sells and recommendations for the financial products to a specific segments of the clients. Retention and churn rate, that's something I spoke about before. So we can identify, again, based on the behavior and pattern recognition, the signals that the client might be in the risk of leaving the service, of churning. Cross-sell, upsell, and fraud detection, again, processes that might improve the financial results or business results of the organization. So how do we actually turn the data into actionable insights or into activations anyway? Unified profile of the customer. When we get all the relevant information from all the departments across the organization, we get the data for better personalization. So how do we actually use the data within financial organization that might be very sensitive? And here we are talking about spending patterns. Do we really need to know within CDP a precise value of every single transaction? No. And most probably, the financial organizations wouldn't even give us such data. Obviously, that's very sensitive data and it's in the core system. Does it belong to CDP? Most probably not. So how do we actually evaluate the spending or let's say withdrawals and deposits of money into bank accounts? That's very sensitive data. We do not need to know every single transaction. We need to know the patterns. So basically, from third-party systems or from data sources, we might only be getting some information like labels on spending patterns, if they are spending a lot, more, less, what are the trends, and so on. And then we can use that kind of information to evaluate what kind of personalization and communication we will use for this particular client. Segmentation. I spoke about the cost of acquisition and conversion rates before, But how do we actually make sure that we are spending money on the right people within the marketing? So we want to target high intent prospects and actually exclude some segments from advertisement. We don't want to be spending money on leads with very low potential. So for this, we again use the customer unified profile. We use the scoring for the leads, and only the leads with a high score will be exported into expensive communication channels such as advertisement or the other channels. Those with low potential for conversion can be excluded, and thus we limit the spending for the ads. Behavioral analytics, huge topic not only for activations, but it can also help within the fraud and risk detection and churn prediction and increasing lifetime value of the customer. So we want to prevent the customer to leave the service prematurely, or to keep them within the service as long as possible, and thus increase the lifetime value. And the lifetime value, of course, can be increased by upsells and cross-sells. So the processes that we are focusing on can start at the very beginning of the life cycle of the client, even before they become the client. So we are scoring the leads. And during the lead scorings, we want to focus on more valuable customers. So those would be either the customers with propensity of converting to high profile products, or with the propensity to convert to multiple services in their lifetime. So based on that information, we can set up the rules for the lead scoring across different devices, different touch points, and so on. Again, this is highly related to detailed profiles and identity management, because nowadays it is very frequent that the clients or the leads are using multiple devices, and especially with more complex financial products such as mortgages, life insurance, and so on, the decision process might take a while, and it will take several visits to your information sources, websites, leaflets, and so on. So we need to make sure that each visit, each behavior of the client is properly recorded, identified, and assigned to the right profile. It might be challenging, but in my opinion, when it's done properly, it pays back a lot, because when we create a unified profile, we can not only provide better scoring for the leads, but also reduce the number of exported profiles to add services and so on. So lead scoring, definitely a hot topic. Lower marketing costs and increased conversions, very much related again to the first stage of the life cycle of the client, even before they become the client, turning them from leads to a paying client, or upselling or cross-selling existing client should have, let's say, beneficial impact on the cost of acquisition. So the smart targeting, again, uses unified profiles, uses the business rules or pattern recognition among the audiences and look-alike audiences. Look-alike audiences in Mail CDP are very easy to create, and there are actually several ways to do it. We can use out-of-the-box functionality of the platform. So first, we define a, let's say, segment based on hard rules, and to this segment, we create look-alike audience. Very simple to imagine. Let's say that we send out an email campaign, and out of that email campaign audience, we take a subset of profiles that responded or converted on that campaign. And to this subset of the audience, we create a look-alike audience. based on specific attributes. Obviously, this should give us pretty good chance that within this look-alike audience, we will have higher conversion rates because they are very similar to those who already converted. Lifetime value, increasing the lifetime value of existing clients. So now we are moving in the client life cycle one step down. We are mostly talking about existing clients, and we need to identify the opportunities on how to either upsell, cross-sell, or keep them longer in the existing service, so reduce the churn possibility. Again, Mayor CDP is great in identifying similar profiles and also using the collected data to recommend possible upsell and cross-sell products. So this is how we increase lifetime value of the customers. And now we are again moving one step further in the life cycle of the client. And it's actually the phase of the life cycle which we want to prevent, and that is, or we actually want to delay it as much as possible. And that's possible churn or leaving the service, leaving the organization. So how to prevent the churn with existing clients? The churn detection can be either done by identifying the patterns of behavior among the clients. It's actually the simplest way how to predict a churn would be a statistical length of how long the clients stay within the service. So let's say for a usual bank account, the clients keep it for 7.3 years and then they start thinking about going to another bank, at least here in Czech Republic. So this would be very, I would say, rough estimation of how long the client will stay within the service, because it doesn't take into account different demography, different segments of the clients, and so on. 7.3 years for a bank account would be an average value. But, for example, for a segment of people between the age of 20 to 25, it might only be 4.2 years, right? So you already see that for each segment, the churn might occur after different time or after different set of behavior. CDP is great in identifying those patterns, not only across the entire customer base, but for each specific segment individually, or even for each specific profile. And sometimes the signals are very easy to read. For example, if the client withdraws a lot of money from their account, does not deposit, stops sending their wages to the account, to their primary account, and so on, then I think it's quite obvious that they are either broke or sending the money somewhere else. So how do we turn the data insights into the revenue? What are the actual strategies for activations that can be used within financial organization? Product recommendations, and especially personalized product recommendations. It's usually driven by rules-based segmentation. So when we look at the data, we need to identify the segments that could be potentially converted into new product or into more services from your organization. So, for example, based on behavior, on historical data, and on, let's say, product saturation of individual profiles, we can decide what else we can offer and what is the right time based on the signals, based on behavior, when to offer the additional product. So creating the segments, connecting the segments to the right activation, activating the client through the right channel. Behavior triggered messaging and alerts. Of course, if we have touch points that are providing the real-time data and we see the interest of a particular profile of a particular client for a specific product, then obviously we need to respond to it. So we need to make sure that the CDP digests the data, connects it to the right profile, and then provides the data to real-time activation. And when we mean by real time, it might be really at the moment when the client is still on the website trying to get more information or deciding whether they should onboard the product or not. Abandoned application recovery. Very similar to, for example, something we know from e-commerce, abandoned basket. But again, it's very important part of the client or customer journey. So when we see that the customer needs to fill in some kind of form, questionnaire, or provide some kind of information to be eligible for the service, and we see that certain percentage of applicants actually drops off at some stage of that application, we need to make sure that we get them back. Well, if they are positively scored as a valuable lead, we need to get them back and make sure they finish the process. Analytical capabilities of Mail CDP should really help you to make sure that you get the right activation to the right people in the right time through the right channel. So we need to make sure that we close the entire cycle of the data. We get the data into CDP, use it for profiles, use it for activation, and we evaluate what kind of impact it had on behavior of the leads or clients. So we should really focus on prioritization of use cases that we see that those use cases have the impact we anticipated and that they are bringing real ROI. And for that, we need to measure it. We can't simply guess it. So we need to make sure that we get right attribution data, that we get the right measurement, and that we are able to calculate the value of conversion directly in CDP, or at least export the data to business intelligence tools to do the analysis. Compliance and security. Simply just make sure that while making money on your clients, you are not losing more money on fines from compliance and security institutions. So make sure it's all within the regulations, and I'm sure it cannot even be the other way around. Automation and real-time engagement. We just need to make sure that we are communicating to the real client right at the moment where they need the information. So we need to provide the right information to the right person in the right time. Okay. Now, when we have all decided that, or agreed, and I'm sure you agree with me, that CDP is a very useful tool for financial organizations, let's have a look on what would be the best practices on how to implement CDP in financial institution and make sure that we are getting the ROI since the very beginning of using CDP within the organization. To make sure that we are using CDP for the right purposes, first, we need to identify the use cases that are aligned with business goals and revenue goals. Of course, we can use CDP for any purpose we want, to collect any data we want, and to create any activation we want. But if we want to make money on that data, make sure it's somehow related to the business. And as with, I would say, most projects done with some kind of data or technology, we want to focus on quick wins. I think it's the Pareto rules that 80% of the cases can be identified and successfully covered in first 20% of implementation time, and the remaining 20% might actually take you another 80% of the budget, but let's put it aside. Focus on the quick wins. They bring usually the most value, and they also help you with the learning curve of how to use the CDP as a platform and how to get the most of your data. The business goals, how to actually identify the business goals and how to make sure that they are supported with the data. Customer journey mapping, the CGM, and customer experience. That might be very useful tools to make sure that you have all the customer journey mapped or customer journey covered, and you have all the key points, key touch points, and data points well mapped on the customer journey, and that you can actually connect the dots, I would say, and make sure that you have the right data in CDP and that you use it for proper activations through critical points on customer journey. Security and compliance. I would say that the successful implementation of CDP in any financial organization really needs to make sure that you engage with compliance teams from the very beginning and make sure that all the data that you are collecting or using for activation is in compliance with the legal and regulation policies. Very often, we still get questions about third-party cookies, third-party data, the data coming from so-called walled gardens, or if it's possible to actually acquire the data from, let's say, third-party sources to enlarge the audiences or to extend the audiences and so on. And to be honest, those are very often questions on shady areas of the data business. And Mero CDP is primarily focusing on first-party data, on the data that is fully in compliance with the legal and regulations. So there are definitely strategies how to use the third-party data and so on. But yeah, do not buy any data. Define your data ingestion strategy. We need to make sure that we have all the data sources well mapped. We know what kind of data comes from which data source, through which interface, in what format, in what frequency, and how to connect the data together to create a profile. Very often, we also need to eliminate, let's say, data redundancy from different sources. And we need to make sure that we have single point of truth. Single point of truth explanation is very simple. What happens if for the same attribute we have different value from two data sources? Which one is the right one? And we need to have some rules on how to decide. All those rules can be easily, I would say, easily implemented in CDP. The implementation is usually easy. What's difficult is to decide on those processes, how to unify the data. And we can do it together with you and with business analysts and data analysts. Quick win activations. Usually we focus on different types of activations for different life stages of the client. So for example, for new clients, we focus on onboarding and increasing the engagement with the product if it's needed, for example. So let's imagine that new client downloads your banking application to their mobile. We need to make sure that they understand how to use it, what are the benefits, and we need to make sure that they actually use the app and they use it on daily basis, right? So that sort of derives or points out to the activation strategy for this kind of client. For clients that are in risk of the churn, the activation strategy will be different. We might be actually offering either upsells, cross-sells, or a personalized offer on price reduction of the service that they already have, and so on. Again, implementation within CDP for all those activation strategies is, I would say, the simpler part. The more difficult one is to come up with those strategies and make sure they really work. CDP can be great support in that. Omnichannel personalization. When we implement the CDP, usually we start with a limited set of communication channels and then we extend it. Once we know it works, we connect additional channels. So once we know that we are working well with web personalization, email personalization, and messaging personalization, we connect more unusual channels, such as even physical branches of the companies who we work with point of sale systems. We might be connecting the data from different sources to make sure we communicate at every single touch point. What we see during the implementations as common mistakes or pitfalls during the implementation project. Data quality. Data quality can be a real nightmare for any organization, not only to financial organizations. But good CDPs or good data tools such as Mayro can actually help a lot with the data quality. And I slightly touched this topic on when I spoke about the source of truth or the golden record, golden profile. So we see that the data quality can be a lot different among different systems. And the data quality might be influenced by the update frequency of the data in different systems. It might be through validation of the data through different systems or simply by formatting of the data in different systems. And within Mayro CDP, we are able to use the ETL or scripting or let's say data cleaning techniques to help with some of the data quality. But at the same time, CDP is not here to clean all the data and to synchronize the clean data back into the data sources. That would not be something I would advise for in CDP implementation projects. So CDP focuses on data that is somehow related to customer communication, customer experience, product experience, and so on, but cannot be responsible for every single data piece in the organization, obviously. What helps is to actually going through some kind of data audit or simple data mapping through the data sources in the organization and identifying the data sources and pieces of data that can be used and will be used in CDP for activation and so on. Failing to align across functional teams. As I said in the entire chapter on data democratization, CDP works the best in the organization that aligns on the business goals and agrees on how to collect the data through different departments, through different data sources, and how to provide the data back to every single team that is reliant or dependent on the data. Integrations. Sometimes we see, I would say, exaggerated intent to integrate every single system and application in the company into CDP and push the data into CDP. I think that approach is more common with data warehouses, where the data warehouse was built for that purpose. Put everything in there and sort it out later. CDP, I wouldn't say it's that kind of tool, and most often it doesn't bring any benefit to store the data that cannot be directly used for activation. So think twice before integrating a data source into CDP. And obviously, privacy and consent management, very important topic. We need to make sure before we even start with the implementation that we have complete overview of where the data comes from, whether it's safe to use it for activations, whether there is proper mapping of consents to activations and to storing of the data and so on. as well as having the processes related to, for example, GDPR processes like right to forget, right to delete, and so on. Which matrices or aspects are we using for actually calculating whether the CDP brings you the expected ROI? We focus on revenues uplifts, cost savings, operational efficiency, and let's say lifetime value of the client. So revenue uplift, simply, if CDP helps you to sell more, then it's quite easy to actually calculate the income part of the ROI. Cost savings. When you reduce the waste on advertisement, when you reduce the waste on communication as such, or lost opportunities, then it's quite easy to actually calculate the uh, cost part of ROI. And operational efficiency. That might be a little bit more difficult to calculate, but it can be calculated, for example, through how many new business cases or how many new activation strategies uh, the organization was able to produce after they implemented CDP. So maybe the easiest way how to assess the operational efficiency, or one of the ways, would be to go back to your teams and ask them, after we implemented CDP, what kind of new selling, advertising, or communication strategies have you implemented? Because now you have the data, right? When we implement the CDP, we need to scale it. And I'm very much aware of the time, but still have a few minutes. So scaling CDP for success. CDP is very often perceived as marketing tool, but that's not just marketing tool. You can use CDP data for other processes within the organization, because at the end of the day, it's the data. And CDP makes sure that the data is well stitched into enriched profiles and can provide a real value as a sort of identity service that really collects the data from all sources and creates quality profiles. Omnichannel activation. So when you want to scale the CDP in the organization, you can either add data sources or activation channels. And it works great because you get more data on the input. You can use the data, well, most of the time, you can use the data for better profiling of the clients and segmentation. And activation channels can lead to better possibility of addressing the right people at the right time. Machine learning and AI. Uh, of course, those tools are great in recognizing the patterns in the data. So they can be used to predict all kinds of behavior of the clients, such as churn risk, uh, upsell and cross-sell propensity. They can identify the profiles that are more sensitive towards pricing, towards new offers, and so on. So really, AI and machine learning can recognize the patterns that would not be obvious to human users. We are living in a crazy time where we will be dividing users to human and non-human users. Love it. Optimize continuously. So CDP gives you great possibility or ability to actually look into whether your campaigns, your activations and processes have the impact that you anticipated. So then it's really logical that you will use it for some kind of A/B testing, experimentation with the data, experimentation with activation strategies, and so on. And you need to evaluate the results and act upon it. So we are at the end of the presentation. Now, a few points that hopefully you will take out of this presentation. Large organizations can hugely benefit from data democratization. CDP, the main points I would say are in real-time personalization. They can help with other processes beyond marketing, such as risk management, product recommendations, and so on, and thus improve the ROI. When you start implementing CDP, try to identify the quick wins and start with the quick win cases and then scale up. When you want to know what kind of ROI you are actually getting from CDP, make sure you measure the ROI properly. So focus on incomes, savings, and operational efficiency. And at the end, real-time activation and compliance-first approach. I think that's the formula for sustainable growth within financial organizations. Okay, and we are at the end, and now it's time, hopefully, for questions and answers. And I can see that there are some questions. Or are there?
Hi, Carol. Yeah, hi, everyone. Yes, we have a question. It's the question is, can you really create reliable customer entity given the complex nature of clients in banking and in the context of data privacy regulations?
Yeah, very good question. Very good question. I would say it is possible, and we do it with most of the organizations. Then we need to define what we mean by reliable customer entity. But yes, I would say that for most of the institutions, it is possible. And again, with the profile, we can start with a small data set or small set of attributes that will describe the entity, and then we can extend it. The data reliability as such, obviously, is very much influenced by the quality of the data in the data sources. So yeah, we can simplify it to rubbish in, rubbish out, but that would be too much of a simplification, because even if we get rubbish in, if we know how to identify that this data is rubbish, it's not reliable, then we can only use it for very limited, let's say, activation cases or use cases and say, okay, this part of the profile contains unreliable data. So don't use it for precise targeting and instead rely on other set of attributes which we know that the data quality is higher and that it's more precise.